Last week, Matt shared the pure reading of the Dhammapada's first 5 chapters, a beautiful presentation of these timeless verses. Today, we're going to dive deep into what these teachings actually mean and why they're surprisingly relevant to your life. I'm Peter from Buddha's Wisdom. Together, we'll unpack the profound wisdom that Matt introduced us to. You see, within these ancient verses that Matt read lie some of Buddhism's most powerful insights about the mind, consciousness, and human behavior. And what's fascinating is how these 2,500-year-old teachings align perfectly with modern psychology and neuroscience. Let's start with Chapter 1, where Matt read about the mind preceding all things. This isn't just ancient philosophy. It's a practical blueprint for understanding how your thoughts shape your entire reality. Let's begin with what might be Buddhism's most famous teaching. As Matt read last week, mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. This isn't just philosophy. It's a practical insight into how your reality works. Think about your morning today. 2 people can experience the exact same situation, let's say getting stuck in traffic, but have completely different experiences based on their mental state. One person might fall into frustration and anger, making their whole day miserable. Another might use it as an opportunity to practice patience or listen to an audiobook. But the Dhammapada goes deeper. It's not just about positive thinking. It's about understanding the actual mechanism of how your mind creates your experience. Notice how the text uses the image of a wheel following an ox's foot. This isn't random. The Buddha chose this metaphor deliberately because it shows both inevitability and immediacy. Just as the wheel follows immediately behind the ox, your experience follows immediately from your mental state. Here's where it gets really interesting. Modern neuroscience has actually confirmed this ancient wisdom. When researchers study brain patterns, they found that our mental states quite literally shape how we perceive and process reality. Your brain doesn't just passively receive information. It actively creates your experience based on your mental patterns. But the Dhammapada doesn't just describe the problem. It offers a solution. Look at the contrast the text creates. The wheel follows the ox both for pure and impure thoughts. This means you have a choice. You're not stuck with your current mental patterns. You can actually train your mind to create different experiences. Let me give you a practical example. Last week, I had a fascinating conversation with a business leader who applied this principle to transform their company culture. When faced with a major project failure, instead of falling into the usual blame game, that impure mental state, they used it as an opportunity for learning and growth. The result? Their team became more innovative, more willing to take calculated risks, because they changed the mental pattern around failure. But this isn't just for business. Let's look at 3 modern applications of this ancient wisdom. Think about how you scroll through your feed. The same post can either trigger anxiety and comparison, the impure mind, or inspire creativity and connection, the pure mind. The content hasn't changed, but your mental approach completely transforms the experience. When your partner or friend does something that upsets you, the Dhammapada offers a fascinating solution. Notice the verses about holding on to abuse and insults. The text isn't asking you to accept bad behavior. It's showing you how to break free from the mental prison of resentment. This is where it gets really practical. Whether you're trying to build a new habit, learn a skill, or achieve any goal, your mind precedes the result. But here's the key most people miss. It's not about forcing positive thinking. It's about understanding the natural law of how your mind creates your reality. Let me share a simple technique you can start using today. I call it the mind precedes method. It's 3 steps. Morning mental setting. Start your day by consciously choosing your mental state. not through forced positivity, but through clear awareness. Pattern recognition. Throughout the day, notice when your mind is creating either positive or negative experiences. Just observe, like a scientist. Conscious redirection. Here's where the Buddhist wisdom becomes practical. When you notice an impure mental state, don't fight it. Instead, redirect your attention to its opposite, just as the text suggests. What makes this teaching so powerful is its universality. Whether you're Buddhist or not, whether you're spiritual or secular, this is a testable principle. Try it for yourself. Pick one area of your life where you're facing challenges and apply this understanding of how mind precedes all things. Once we understand how our thoughts shape our reality, the next step is to take control. This brings us to Chapter 2, Heedfulness, a practice that ensures our awareness remains sharp and purposeful. Now that we understand how mind precedes all things, let's explore why the Buddha placed heedfulness as the second chapter. As Matt read last week, heedfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. The heedful die not. The heedless are as if dead already. Strong words, aren't they? But what does heedfulness actually mean in our modern context? Think of it as radical awareness, the opposite of functioning on autopilot. In today's world of constant notifications, endless scrolling, and continuous partial attention, this teaching becomes more relevant than ever. Let's break this down practically. The text uses a fascinating metaphor: mindful among the heedless, wide awake among the sleeping. Look around any public space today. How many people are truly present? How many are lost in their phones, trapped in mental replays of past events, or anxiously planning the future? But here's where it gets interesting. The Dhammapada isn't asking you to become a monk or retreat from modern life. Instead, it's offering a practical strategy for thriving in it. Notice how the text mentions that through heedfulness, Indra gained supremacy among the gods. This isn't just ancient mythology. It's a practical principle about excellence and leadership. Let me share 3 modern applications. Instead of the typical digital detox advice, try what I call conscious engagement. When you pick up your phone, do it with full awareness. You'll be amazed at how this simple shift changes your relationship with technology. In the workplace, heedfulness becomes your superpower. While others react automatically to problems, your awareness allows you to respond thoughtfully. I recently worked with a surgeon who credits his success not to better technical skills, but to better moment-to-moment awareness. This is where heedfulness truly shines. How often do we really listen to our loved ones? How often are we mentally elsewhere while physically present? The text tells us that the heedful die not, meaning your relationships stay alive and vibrant through conscious attention. Now that we've uncovered the power of awareness, let's move to Chapter 3, where the Buddha teaches us how to train the mind with precision and patience. Now we arrive at what I consider one of the most practical chapters in the Dhammapada, Chapter 3, the mind. As Matt beautifully read last week, the flickering, fickle mind, difficult to guard, difficult to control. The wise person straightens as a fletcher straightens an arrow. This analogy of the fletcher, the arrow maker, is brilliant. Think about it. An arrow doesn't become straight through force or sudden movement. It requires patient, skilled, careful adjustment. The same applies to our minds. But here's where many modern practitioners get stuck. They try to force their mind into submission through rigid discipline. Notice how the Dhammapada uses a different metaphor next. Like a fish that is drawn from its watery abode and thrown upon land, even so does this mind flutter. This isn't just poetry, it's a practical observation about how our minds work. Trying to force your mind into calmness can make things worse. Instead, the Dhammapada teaches us to observe and gently guide it, like allowing water to settle naturally. Let me share a fascinating modern parallel. Neuroscientists studying meditation have found that trying to force the mind into calmness actually activates our stress response. Instead, the most effective approach mirrors exactly what the Dhammapada teaches. Patient, consistent training with understanding. The text talks about fortifying this mind like a well-fortified city. In our modern context, this means creating mental boundaries. When you're working, be fully at work. When you're resting, fully rest. No more half states of perpetual distraction. Notice how the text mentions water several times. When water is agitated, you can't see through it, but you don't calm water by fighting it. You let it settle naturally. The same applies to your mind during meditation or stressful situations. The text reminds us that this body is fragile like a clay pot, but rather than being morbid, this understanding liberates us. When we accept our temporary nature, we paradoxically become more capable of living fully. With a trained mind, we can now explore how to engage with the world around us in harmony. Chapter 4 offers a beautiful metaphor for this: the bee gathering nectar. Moving from understanding the mind, we come to a beautifully crafted chapter that uses nature as its teacher. Chapter 4, Flowers. As we heard in Matt's reading, as a bee gathers nectar and departs without harming the flower, its color or fragrance, so let the sage go about in the village. This isn't just poetic imagery, it's a sophisticated guide for navigating modern life. Think about the bee for a moment. It's incredibly efficient, focused, and beneficial to its environment. It doesn't get caught up in drama, doesn't destroy what it touches, and creates value wherever it goes. But there's an even deeper teaching here. Notice how the text moves from this beautiful image to a stark warning. Death sweeps away the person of distracted mind who only plucks the flowers of pleasure. This contrast isn't accidental. It's showing us two ways of living: mindful engagement versus mindless consumption. Let me share a modern application that might surprise you. In today's digital age, we're all gathering nectar from various sources: social media, news, entertainment. But are we doing it like the bee, taking what's valuable while preserving the source? Or are we mindlessly plucking flowers, destroying value for momentary pleasure? Just as the bee doesn't visit every flower, we don't need to engage with every piece of content, every argument, or every opportunity that comes our way. It's about intelligent selection. The bee doesn't just take, it pollinates as it goes. In your daily interactions, are you leaving situations better than you found them? Are you creating value even as you pursue your own goals? The text tells us that the fragrance of virtue spreads against the wind. In today's interconnected world, this teaching becomes even more relevant. Your actions, your words, your online presence, they all create a fragrance that affects others. The bee's wisdom shows us how to live in harmony. But how do we avoid falling into foolishness? Chapter 5 offers an important lesson. Finally, we arrive at what might be the most confronting chapter, Chapter 5, The Fool. As Matt read, long is the night to the sleepless, long is the league to the weary, long is samsara to fools who know not the sublime truth. Now, before you think this chapter is about criticizing others, it's actually offering us something profound. Notice the first example used, the sleepless person. We've all been there, right? Tossing and turning, watching the minutes crawl by. The text is showing us how our mental state creates our reality. But here's where it gets really interesting. The text gives us this striking metaphor. Though all his life a fool associates with a wise man, he no more comprehends the truth than a spoon tastes the flavor of the soup. Think about that for a moment. You can have the best information, the best teachers, the best resources, but if you're not truly engaging with the wisdom, you're like this spoon. It's in the soup every day, but never tastes anything. This is incredibly relevant in our age of information overload. We have access to more knowledge than ever before, but are we really digesting it? Are we applying it? Or are we just collecting information without transformation? Let me share 3 modern manifestations of what the Dhammapada calls foolishness. The knowledge-action gap, having thousands of saved posts about productivity while procrastinating, having meditation apps but never meditating. The fool, according to this text, isn't the person who doesn't know. It's the person who knows but doesn't apply. The ego trap. Notice how the text mentions the fool who seeks undeserved reputation. In today's social media age, this becomes even more relevant. Are we building genuine wisdom, or just crafting an image of wisdom? The path confusion. The chapter ends with a crucial distinction: the difference between worldly gain and true development. This isn't about rejecting success, but understanding what real success means. What makes this chapter so powerful is that it's not about judgment, it's about awareness. Each of us can be wise or foolish in different moments. The key is recognizing which path we're on. The Dhammapada doesn't just point out foolishness, it shows us the way out. Through mindful attention, through genuine application of wisdom, and through honest self-reflection, we can transform our understanding from superficial to profound. Looking back at our journey through these first 5 chapters, we can see how they build upon each other beautifully. We began with the fundamental truth that mind precedes all things, then learned how heedfulness protects and guides us, discovered practical ways to train our mind, understood how to gather wisdom like a bee gathers nectar, and finally learned to distinguish between true wisdom and mere knowledge. As we reflect on these teachings from the Dhammapada, you might be wondering how to put all this wisdom into practice. Let me share 3 key takeaways that connect all 5 chapters. Your mind is the starting point for everything. As we learned in Chapter 1, your thoughts shape your reality. This isn't mystical thinking. It's practical psychology that the Buddha understood 2,500 years ago. Awareness is your superpower, whether it's being heedful in Chapter 2, training your mind in Chapter 3, gathering wisdom like a bee in Chapter 4, or avoiding foolishness in Chapter 5. Everything starts with awareness. Application matters more than knowledge. These teachings aren't meant to be merely understood. They're meant to be lived. Start small today. Notice how your thoughts influence your actions. Practice mindfulness and choose wisdom over distraction. Next week, Matt will continue with the pure reading of chapters 6 to 10, and I'll follow with another deep dive into their meaning and practical applications. If you found value in these insights, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know which chapter resonated most with you. This is Peter from Buddha's Wisdom, and I'll see you in the next exploration.